The day America's most feared slave catcher became a freedom fighter. The shocking betrayal. The iron shackles bit into Marcus Webb's wrists as he stood in the pre-dawn darkness of Charleston's slave market, watching the man who had promised him freedom count out 30 silver coins. Marcus had trusted Henry Caldwell for 6 months, worked alongside him in the tobacco fields, shared bread with him during midnight meetings, believed every word about the Underground Railroad contact waiting in the next county. Now Caldwell was pocketing blood money from the very overseer Marcus had been running from. Welcome to Frontier Chronicles. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of survival and justice from America's darkest chapter. I'm sorry, Marcus, Caldwell whispered, not meeting his eyes. They threatened my family. Said they'd sell my wife and children south if I didn't give you up. Marcus said nothing. Words wouldn't change what was happening. The overseer, a thick-necked man named Garrison, jerked the chain attached to Marcus's collar. Move, boy. Mr. Thorndale's been waiting 3 weeks for your return. But Marcus wasn't going back to Thorndale's plantation. Not alive, anyway. As Garrison led him toward the wagon, Marcus noticed something the overseer hadn't. The crowd gathering in the early morning market included 3 faces he recognized. Isaiah, Rebecca, and Thomas. Fellow runaways from neighboring plantations who had successfully made it north 2 years ago. They'd come back. For him. Isaiah's eyes met Marcus's for just a fraction of a second. A tiny nod. Then Isaiah stumbled dramatically into Garrison, spilling a basket of apples across the cobblestones. As Garrison cursed and shoved Isaiah aside, Rebecca screamed that she'd been robbed. Within seconds, the quiet morning erupted into chaos, vendors shouting, people running, dogs barking. Marcus didn't hesitate. He drove his elbow into Garrison's throat, grabbed the key ring from the overseer's belt, and ran. His hands were still shackled, but his legs were free, and he'd grown up running these Charleston streets before Thorndale purchased him at age 12. Behind him, Garrison's whistle pierced the air. Run away. $50 to whoever stops him. Marcus ducked into an alley, his heart hammering. His fingers fumbled with the key ring, 7 keys, and he didn't know which one fit his shackles. He tried 3 before the 4th one clicked. The shackles fell away just as 2 men appeared at the alley entrance. There he is. Marcus climbed. The brick wall was old, with plenty of handholds. He pulled himself onto a roof just as hands grabbed at his ankles. He kicked free, rolled across the shingles, and kept running across the rooftops of Charleston's merchant district. He could hear the pursuit spreading below him, men shouting, horses whinnying, bells ringing the alarm. Every white man in Charleston would be looking for him now. Every constable, every slave catcher, every opportunist who wanted $50. He dropped into a narrow courtyard behind a blacksmith's shop and found Isaiah waiting with a horse. Go north, Isaiah said, pressing a knife and a small pouch into Marcus's hands. There's a bounty hunter named Silas Crane working this territory. He's the best tracker in 3 states, and Thorndale just hired him. You've got maybe 6 hours before Crane picks up your trail. Why'd you come back? Marcus asked, swinging onto the horse. Because nobody gets left behind. Isaiah slapped the horse's flank. Now ride. Marcus rode. He pushed the horse hard, heading northwest toward the mountains where the forests grew thick and tracking became difficult. He knew the basics of evading pursuit: stay off roads, move through water when possible, avoid leaving tracks. His father had taught him that before Thorndale separated them 15 years ago. By noon, he'd covered 20 miles. He dismounted near a creek, let the horse drink, and opened the pouch Isaiah had given him. Inside was dried meat, a small compass, and a piece of paper with a hand-drawn map showing safe houses between Charleston and the Tennessee border. He was studying the map when he heard it, the distant baying of hounds. 6 hours, Isaiah had said. It had been closer to 5. Marcus abandoned the horse. A mounted rider left too obvious a trail. He waded into the creek and moved upstream for half a mile before climbing out on the rocky bank. He rubbed himself with wild onions to mask his scent and kept moving. The baying grew louder. Whoever this Silas Crane was, he was good. As the sun began to set, Marcus found the first safe house marked on Isaiah's map, a small farmstead owned by a Quaker family. He approached cautiously, watching for any sign of danger. An elderly woman was working in the garden. "I'm looking for friends," Marcus said quietly, using the phrase Isaiah had told him. The woman looked up, studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Friends of friends are welcome here. Come inside, quickly." She led him into a root cellar beneath the barn. "You can stay until—" The sound of horses stopped her mid-sentence. The woman's face went pale. "They're here already. How did they find you so fast?" Through a crack in the cellar door, Marcus watched 6 riders enter the farmyard. The man leading them was lean and weathered, with ice-blue eyes and a rifle across his saddle. He moved with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Silas Crane. "Good evening, ma'am," Crane said, his voice surprisingly polite. "I'm tracking a fugitive slave. 6 foot tall, 28 years old," answers to Marcus. "Have you seen anyone matching that description?" The Quaker woman stood her ground. "I've seen no one. Now please leave my property." Crane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, I admire your principles. I truly do. But I'm very good at my job." He nodded to his men. "Search the property." Marcus's hand closed around the knife Isaiah had given him. If they found him, he wouldn't go quietly. Not this time. The cellar door was flung open. Torchlight flooded in. A man pointed his rifle down at Marcus. "Got him." Marcus lunged upward with the knife, but before he could strike, Crane's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't kill him. Thorndale wants him alive." 3 men dragged Marcus out of the cellar. He fought, but they were prepared for it. Within seconds, he was face down in the dirt with a boot on his neck and his arms being bound behind his back. Crane dismounted and walked over, studying Marcus with professional interest. "You made it farther than most. Used the creek to throw off the dogs, rubbed yourself with onions, avoided the obvious routes. Impressive." "Go to hell," Marcus spat. "Probably will," Crane agreed. He turned to the Quaker woman. "Ma'am, I could have you arrested for harboring a fugitive. But I won't, because I respect what you're trying to do, even if it's illegal." He paused. "Just know that mercy has limits. Next time, you might not be so lucky." As they hauled Marcus toward the horses, something unexpected happened. Crane pulled out his pistol and shot the lock off Marcus's chains. For a moment, everyone froze in confusion. "Run," Crane said quietly. Marcus didn't understand, but he didn't wait for an explanation. He ran. Behind him, Crane's men shouted in confusion. "Boss, what the hell?" "My pistol misfired," Crane said loudly. "Damn thing went off by accident." "Well, don't just stand there. After him." But Crane made no move to follow. He just stood there, watching Marcus disappear into the darkening forest, a strange expression on his weathered face. One of his men rode up beside him. "Boss, we could still catch him." "Could we?" Crane mounted his horse. "It's getting dark. Tracking at night is dangerous. We'll make camp and pick up the trail at first light." "But Thorndale. We'll get his runaway. Eventually." Crane turned his horse. "Just not tonight." As the bounty hunters made camp, Marcus ran through the darkness, his mind reeling. Silas Crane had let him go. Why? It didn't make sense. Unless. The thought that followed was even more dangerous than the pursuit itself. What if the most feared bounty hunter in 3 states had a conscience? And if he did, what did that mean for the hunt that was surely coming tomorrow? Survival, pursuit, and counteraction. Marcus didn't stop running until his legs gave out 3 miles into the forest. He collapsed against an oak tree, his lungs burning, his mind racing faster than his feet had carried him. Silas Crane had freed him. Shot his own chains off. Told him to run. Why would a bounty hunter, a man who made his living returning runaways to slavery, sabotage his own capture? It had to be a trick. Some kind of twisted game. But the look in Crane's eyes had been real. Marcus had seen enough cruelty in his 28 years to recognize its absence when it appeared. He forced himself to move again. Trick or not, he had maybe 8 hours before dawn, and Crane's accidental pistol discharge wouldn't fool anyone for long. By morning, the real hunt would resume. Marcus followed Isaiah's map northeast toward the Tennessee border, moving through the night by moonlight and instinct. He avoided farmsteads now. The Quaker woman's near capture had taught him that safe houses weren't safe if the hunters were competent enough. And Crane was more than competent. At dawn, Marcus found a dense thicket beside a stream and crawled inside to rest. He was exhausted, hungry, and completely alone in hostile territory. The dried meat from Isaiah's pouch was gone. His knife was his only weapon. And somewhere behind him, 6 armed men and a tracker who could apparently find anyone were preparing to resume the pursuit. He dozed fitfully, waking at every sound, birds, rustling leaves, the stream's constant murmur. Around noon, he heard voices. Trail goes cold here. He used the water again. Check both banks. He had to come out somewhere. Marcus held his breath, pressing himself deeper into the thicket. Through the leaves, he could see Crane and 2 of his men examining the stream bank. The bounty hunter moved methodically, studying the ground, the vegetation, the pattern of disturbed pebbles. Crane looked directly at Marcus's hiding spot. Marcus's heart stopped. But Crane's eyes moved on, scanning past the thicket without pausing. He's not here, Crane called to his men. Probably doubled back upstream. Let's try north. The men rode away. Marcus waited 10 full minutes before moving, his mind reeling again. Crane had looked right at him. Right at him. And said nothing. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a trick. Silas Crane was deliberately letting him escape. The question was why, and how long Crane could maintain the deception before his men realized what was happening. Marcus emerged from the thicket and headed east, perpendicular to the direction Crane had sent his men. He needed to understand what was happening. Needed to know if he could trust this impossible turn of events. And there was only one way to find out. That night, Marcus did something insane. Instead of running, he circled back and found Crane's camp. The bounty hunter was sitting alone by the fire while his men slept, cleaning his rifle with methodical care. Marcus approached silently, knife in hand, until he was close enough to speak without waking the others. Why? Crane didn't even flinch. He just kept cleaning his rifle. Wondered when you'd work up the courage to ask. You let me go. Twice. I did. Why? Crane set down his rifle and finally looked at Marcus. In the firelight, his weathered face showed every one of his 40-some years. Because I'm tired, he said simply. Tired of hunting men whose only crime was being born the wrong color. Tired of the screams when I bring them back. Tired of the nightmares about the ones who chose death over chains. He pulled something from his coat, a small daguerreotype. This was my daughter. Sarah. She died 3 years ago. Cholera. He stared at the image. Before she died, she asked me what I did for a living. I told her I was a tracker. She asked what I tracked. I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't tell my dying child that I made my living hunting human beings. Crane tucked the daguerreotype away. She died thinking I was a good man. I'd like to do at least one good thing before I join her. Maybe that'll count for something. Marcus lowered his knife, though he didn't sheath it. Your men will figure it out eventually. They already suspect. But they're loyal to me, and the pay is good. They'll stay quiet as long as I don't make it too obvious. Crane poked the fire. You need to get to Tennessee. Cross the border, head for Jonesboro. There's a conductor there named William Wright who can get you on the railroad properly. Can you make it 40 more miles? If I don't get caught. You won't. I'll make sure of that. Crane stood up. Now get out of here before someone wakes up and this whole conversation becomes complicated. Marcus hesitated. What happens when Thorndale finds out you let me go? I'll tell him you were too clever, the trail went cold, you must have had help. Crane's smile was bitter. I've told that lie before. I'll tell it again. And if he doesn't believe you? Then I'll retire early. Crane met his eyes. But you'll be long gone by then. That's what matters. Marcus wanted to say something more, thank you, or I'm sorry, or maybe just acknowledge the terrible courage it took for a man like Crane to betray everything he'd built his life around. But words felt inadequate. Instead, he nodded once and vanished into the darkness. Behind him, Crane returned to cleaning his rifle, preparing to fail at his job for the first time in 20 years, and not caring at all. But Crane's plan fell apart 72 hours later in the worst possible way. Marcus was 15 miles from the Tennessee border when he heard the gunshot. He froze, listening. Another shot. Then screaming, a woman's voice, high and desperate. He should have kept moving. Should have focused on his own survival. But the screaming continued, and Marcus found his feet carrying him toward the sound before his brain could object. He burst into a small clearing and found a nightmare. A young black woman, couldn't have been more than 19, was on the ground, bleeding from a shoulder wound. Two white men stood over her, rifles in hand, arguing. I said we take her alive, the first man growled. Thorndale wants examples, not corpses. She tried to run, the second man protested. What was I supposed to do? Marcus recognized them, two of Crane's men. And the woman on the ground must be another runaway they were hunting. The woman's eyes found Marcus's, widening with desperate hope. She mouthed one word, please. Marcus stepped into the clearing, knife ready. Let her go. Both men spun, raising their rifles. Well, the first man said. Marcus Webb. Boss said you'd gotten away, but here you are, walking right to us. Thorndale's going to be pleased. I said let her go. Or what? You'll stab us with that butter knife? The man laughed. Put it down, boy. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Marcus didn't put down the knife. He'd spent his whole life calculating odds, measuring survival against dignity, choosing to live in chains rather than die free. But something had shifted inside him over the past week. Crane's unexpected mercy had reminded him that courage existed in the world. That change was possible. That one person's choice could matter. He wasn't going back to chains. And he wasn't going to watch this woman die. Last chance, the man said, cocking his rifle. That's when Silas Crane stepped out of the trees, his own rifle aimed at his men's backs. Lower your weapons. Both men froze. Boss? I said lower your weapons. Boss, what the hell? Do it. Now. Slowly, reluctantly, they lowered their rifles. The second man turned to face Crane, his face twisted with realization. You've been letting them go. All this time. How many, Crane? How many bounties have you sabotaged? Enough, Crane said quietly. You're a traitor. A goddamn traitor to your own kind. Crane's expression didn't change. My kind? What kind is that exactly? The kind that hunts people for money? The kind that tells themselves they're just following the law while they tear families apart? He shook his head. If that's my kind, then yes. I'm a traitor. And I'm proud of it. The first man made a move for his rifle. Crane's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The second man raised his hands immediately. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Get out of here, Crane said. Both of you. Go back to Charleston. Tell Thorndale his runaway got away. Tell him his bounty hunter retired. Tell him whatever you want. But if I see either of you hunting runaways again, I won't aim for your shoulder. The wounded man struggled to his feet, supported by his companion. They stumbled toward their horses, casting fearful glances back at Crane. Within minutes, they were gone. Marcus lowered his knife, his hands shaking with adrenaline. You just destroyed your entire life. I know. Crane walked over to the wounded woman and examined her shoulder. Bullet went clean through. You'll live if we stop the bleeding. He tore strips from his own shirt and began bandaging the wound with practiced efficiency. The woman stared at him in confused terror, unable to process why a white bounty hunter was helping her. My name's Silas Crane, he said gently. And I'm done hunting people. From now on, I'm helping them instead. He looked up at Marcus. Tennessee border is still your best bet. But now you've got company. He nodded at the woman. Her name's Grace. She's been running for 2 months from a plantation in Virginia. I've been tracking her for 3 weeks, and every night I've been sabotaging my own pursuit. He finished tying the bandage. Guess I don't have to pretend anymore. Marcus helped Grace to her feet. She was weak from blood loss but steady enough to walk. Why are you doing this? She whispered to Crane. Because my daughter would have wanted me to. Crane gathered his supplies. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I'm tired of being the monster in other people's nightmares. He met her eyes. Pick whichever reason you like best. Over the next week, Silas Crane did something unprecedented in the history of the antebellum South. He became a conductor on the Underground Railroad, not by joining an existing network, but by actively sabotaging the slave-catching system from within. He led Marcus and Grace north, using his knowledge of patrol routes and tracking techniques to avoid every danger. When they encountered other bounty hunters, Crane sent them in wrong directions with false information. When they reached checkpoints, Crane's reputation was enough to wave them through without searches. This is insane, Marcus said one night as they camped in the Tennessee mountains. Every mile we travel, you're adding to the crimes they'll charge you with. Crane shrugged. In for a penny, in for a pound. They'll hang you if they catch you. They'd have to catch me first. And I'm very good at not being caught. Crane poked the fire. Besides, I spent 20 years building a reputation as the best tracker in 3 states. Might as well use that reputation for something worthwhile before it's gone. Grace, her shoulder healing well, spoke up quietly. What will you do after? After you get us to safety? Crane thought about it. I know routes, safe houses, patrol patterns from Charleston to Cincinnati. I know how the slave catchers think, where they search, what mistakes runaways make. That knowledge could save a lot of lives if I used it properly. You're going to keep doing this, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Until they catch me or I'm too old to ride. Crane smiled. My daughter asked me what I did for a living. Now, when I meet her again, I'll have a better answer. They reached Jonesboro 5 days later. William Wright, the conductor Crane had mentioned, greeted them with surprise and cautious respect. Silas Crane. Heard you retired from the bounty business. Retired from one business, Crane corrected. Started another. Wright studied him carefully. The network doesn't trust easily. Especially not former slave catchers. I don't need trust. I need to get these two on the railroad to Cincinnati, and I need information about routes north. Crane met his eyes. I have skills you can use. Knowledge that could save lives. All I'm asking is a chance to prove I'm serious. Wright looked at Marcus and Grace. What do you two say? Can he be trusted? Marcus thought about the past 3 weeks. About Crane shooting his chains off. About Crane sabotaging his own pursuit. About Crane throwing away 20 years of reputation and income to help people he'd once hunted. About Crane facing down his own men to save Grace's life. He can be trusted, Marcus said firmly. Grace nodded agreement. Wright considered this for a long moment, then extended his hand to Crane. Welcome to the railroad. God knows we need someone who thinks like a hunter. As they shook hands, Marcus felt something shift in the world. Not something big, the system of slavery wouldn't fall because one bounty hunter changed sides. But it was something real. Something meaningful. One man's conscience had saved 2 lives. And if Crane continued this work, how many more might he save? 10. 20. 100. Thank you, Marcus said to Crane as they prepared to continue north. For everything. Crane shook his head. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You reminded me that it's never too late to choose who you want to be. They said their goodbyes. Marcus and Grace headed north toward Canada and freedom, guided by railroad conductors. Crane headed south, back toward the danger zone, ready to use his skills to help the next desperate runaway who needed someone with insider knowledge. The system would continue. The horrors would continue. The hunt would continue. But now, at least, the hunted had one more ally. One more person willing to risk everything to help them survive. And sometimes, in a world of darkness, one light was enough to show the way forward. Final confrontation and justice. 3 months later, Silas Crane had become a ghost story among slave catchers. Runaways vanished from locked cells. Trails went cold at impossible locations. Bounty hunters found themselves chasing false leads that wasted weeks. The network of informants and corrupt officials who'd once profited from the slave trade started turning up dead broke, their payment money stolen, their expensive tracking dogs poisoned, their reputations destroyed by carefully planted rumors. The man responsible was Charleston's former most feared tracker, now operating under a dozen different names, moving through the South like smoke. Crane saved 17 people in those 3 months. A family of 5 from a Georgia plantation. 3 young men who'd escaped from a breeding farm in Mississippi. 2 elderly people who'd chosen freedom over dying in chains. A woman who'd killed her master after he'd sold her children. Each time, Crane used his knowledge of slave-catching tactics to stay 3 steps ahead of pursuit, guiding them north to safety before vanishing again. But his luck ran out in November, in the worst possible place. Thorndale's plantation. Crane had returned to South Carolina tracking a 14-year-old girl named Sarah, the same name as his daughter. She'd escaped from Thorndale's estate after the overseer had tried to rape her, and 3 bounty hunters were already on her trail. Crane got to her first, found her hiding in a tobacco barn, terrified and exhausted. "I'm not going back," she whispered, holding a rusty knife. "I'll die first." "You don't have to die, and you don't have to go back," Crane said gently. "I'm here to help." But he'd miscalculated. The other bounty hunters hadn't been chasing Sarah, they'd been chasing him. Word had spread about Crane's betrayal, and Richard Thorndale had offered $1,000 for Crane's capture. Dead or alive, but preferably alive so Thorndale could make an example of him. The barn door burst open. 6 men with rifles surrounded them. And standing behind them, well-dressed and furious, was Thorndale himself. "Silas Crane," Thorndale said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The great tracker, reduced to stealing property. How the mighty have fallen." Crane stepped in front of Sarah, blocking her from view. She's a child, Thorndale. Not property. She's my property. Just like the Negro you helped escape 3 months ago. Just like the 17 others you've stolen from their rightful owners. Thorndale stepped closer. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? That I wouldn't connect the pattern of failures to your sudden retirement? I hoped you'd be too stupid, Crane said calmly. Guess I overestimated you. One of the bounty hunters hit Crane with a rifle butt, dropping him to his knees. Sarah screamed and tried to run, but they caught her easily, binding her hands. Thorndale crouched in front of Crane, smiling. I'm going to enjoy this. I've assembled quite an audience, every plantation owner within 50 miles. They've all lost property to your little crusade, and they're all very interested in witnessing what happens to traitors. They dragged Crane into Thorndale's yard, where a whipping post had been erected. 50 white men stood in a semicircle, plantation owners and overseers, all eager to watch justice served. Behind them, forced to witness, were 200 enslaved people from Thorndale's plantation, a warning about what happened to anyone who helped runaways. Crane was tied to the post, his shirt torn away to expose his back. Thorndale addressed the crowd with theatrical flair. This man betrayed everything we stand for. He betrayed his race, his honor, his very purpose. He deserves nothing but pain and death. The crowd murmured agreement. Thorndale picked up the whip himself. 20 lashes for each person he helped escape. That's 340 lashes. Most men don't survive 100. Let's see how long the great Silas Crane lasts. The first lash struck. Crane grunted but didn't scream. The second lash drew blood. The third made his knees buckle. By the 10th, his back was a mass of torn flesh. And still he didn't scream. From somewhere in the crowd of enslaved people, a woman began singing. Low and mournful, an old spiritual about crossing rivers and finding freedom. Another voice joined her. Then another. Within seconds, 200 voices were singing together, drowning out Thorndale's curses, transforming Crane's punishment into something else entirely. A testament. A memorial. A promise that his sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. Thorndale screamed at them to stop, but they didn't. They sang louder, their voices filling the plantation, carrying across the cotton fields. The plantation owners looked uneasy now, realizing they were losing control of the narrative. At lash 37, Crane finally spoke. Worth it, he gasped. Every single one of them. Worth it. At lash 50, Marcus Webb stepped out of the crowd. The singing stopped. Every eye turned to him. He was supposed to be in Canada by now, safe and free. Instead, he stood in the middle of Thorndale's plantation, visible and vulnerable, facing the man who'd owned him for 16 years. Marcus, Crane whispered. Run, you fool. Run. Marcus ignored him. He walked straight to Thorndale and said clearly, You want property returned? Here I am. Let Crane go, and I'll go back to your chains willingly. Thorndale's eyes widened with greedy excitement. Well, well. The prodigal returns. But why would I trade when I can have both? Because if you don't, I'll make sure you never profit from my labor again. Marcus held up his hands. They were trembling, but his voice was steady. I've spent 3 months in the north. I've learned to read and write. I've learned my rights under law. I've learned what newspapers care about and how to contact them. He looked around at the assembled plantation owners. You want me back? Fine. But I'll fight you every single day. I'll slow my work. I'll teach others to resist. I'll make myself more trouble than I'm worth. And every newspaper in the north will hear about it. I'll have you killed, Thorndale hissed. Then you'll lose your investment and your reputation. Marcus smiled grimly. Martyrs are expensive, Thorndale. Bad for business. The plantation owners were murmuring now, calculating costs and risks. Marcus was right, a resistant, educated slave who knew how to contact abolitionists would be nothing but problems. And killing him would just create sympathy in northern newspapers. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to face the crowd of enslaved people. I came back for one reason. To tell you that freedom is possible. 17 people made it north because Silas Crane helped them. Hundreds more have made it on the railroad. The system they use to control us isn't as strong as they pretend. It can be beaten. It will be beaten. Silence him. Thorndale screamed. 3 overseers rushed Marcus, but the crowd of enslaved people surged forward, placing themselves between Marcus and his attackers. It wasn't a violent surge, just 200 people stepping forward together, a wall of bodies protecting one of their own. The plantation owners backed away, suddenly realizing how outnumbered they were. Their rifles were useful for hunting individuals, but useless against a crowd this large. If these people decided to revolt right now, the owners would be torn apart. Let Crane go, Marcus repeated. Cut him down, give him his horse and his weapons, and let him ride away. Do that, and I'll order them to stand down. I'll go back to your plantation quietly. Refuse, and see what happens when 200 people decide they've had enough. It was a bluff. Marcus had no authority to order anyone. But Thorndale didn't know that. All Thorndale saw was his property suddenly unified, suddenly dangerous, suddenly willing to risk everything. Fine, Thorndale spat. Cut him down. They cut Crane's bonds. The bounty hunter collapsed, his back a ruin of blood and torn flesh. 2 enslaved women immediately moved to help him, supporting his weight. They carried him to his horse, helped him mount, and handed him his rifle. Crane looked down at Marcus, his eyes filled with pain and something deeper, understanding, perhaps, or sorrow. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. Marcus managed a small smile. You taught me that one person's choice can matter. That it's never too late to choose who you want to be. Now I'm choosing to be someone who doesn't abandon his friends. I'll come back for you, Crane promised. I swear it. No. Marcus shook his head. Keep helping others. Save the next person. And the one after that. That's how you honor this. Crane wanted to argue, but his body was failing, shock and blood loss dragging him toward unconsciousness. He nodded once, then kicked his horse into motion. The crowd parted, letting him through. The plantation owners watched him go, too afraid of the assembled enslaved people to stop him. When Crane disappeared into the trees, Marcus turned to face Thorndale. I'm ready. But Thorndale wasn't looking at Marcus. He was looking at the crowd, at their unified stance, at the way they'd stepped forward without hesitation to protect one of their own. Something had shifted on his plantation, and he knew it. Take him to the cells, Thorndale said quietly, all his earlier fury gone. And the rest of you, back to work. Now. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. As they left, though, Marcus heard them whispering to each other. Repeating his words. 17 people made it north. Freedom is possible. The system can be beaten. Seeds planted. Hope renewed. The story spreading. Marcus was taken to the punishment cells, but he didn't regret his choice. Crane was alive. The story would spread. And somewhere in the north, 17 people were living free because one man had found his conscience. That night, locked in darkness, Marcus heard a quiet voice through the cell wall. That was brave. Foolish, but brave. It was Henry Caldwell, the man who'd betrayed Marcus 3 months ago. I'm sorry, Henry whispered. They threatened my family. I didn't know what else to. I know, Marcus interrupted. I understand. Do you forgive me? Marcus thought about it. Thought about Crane's transformation from hunter to helper. Thought about second chances and redemption and the complicated nature of survival in an evil system. Yes, he said finally. I forgive you. They talked through the night, quietly, carefully. And by morning, Marcus had recruited his first ally in the resistance movement he was planning to build from within Thorndale's plantation. Because if Crane could change the system from outside, maybe Marcus could change it from inside. 6 months later, a letter reached the offices of an abolitionist newspaper in Boston. It had been smuggled out by a sympathetic Quaker who'd visited Thorndale's plantation. The letter was unsigned, but the message was clear. 17 souls freed. Hundreds more inspired. The system trembles when one conscience awakens. Tell the story. Spread the word. Freedom is closer than they want you to believe. And the bounty hunter who found his conscience is still riding, still fighting, still saving lives. The newspaper printed the story. Other newspapers picked it up. The tale spread across the North, the bounty hunter who betrayed his profession for justice, and the runaway who returned to slavery to save continue 11:58 him. Some called it legend. Some called it propaganda. But the enslaved people working on southern plantations whispered the story to each other and believed. And somewhere in Tennessee, Silas Crane read the newspaper article, his scarred back still aching, and smiled. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket, next to the daguerreotype of his daughter. Then he mounted his horse and rode south again, toward the next desperate person who needed help. Because conscience, once awakened, demanded action. And justice, though delayed, was always worth fighting for.